you've been actively and publicly challenging Michael Saylor, CEO of MicroStrategy, to a debate on gold versus Bitcoin. Let me just show the audience this tweet that you've made a few weeks back. I'm just going to read it. Spent last few weeks attempting to challenge Michael Saylor to a friendly debate, gold versus Bitcoin, on a respected media outlet. All right, so first of all, just Frank, you're a busy guy. You've got a lot to handle on your plate. Why are you taking time out of your day to challenge Michael Saylor? First, I'm assuming you've never met the guy, right?
No, never met him. Never met him. But I have spent the last few months, as I started to look into Bitcoin over the last sort of 6 months, I started to look at many of his interviews, and I've watched a lot. I'm not sure I've watched all of them. And I'm willing to be proven wrong, but my sense is that his strategy is a very clever and calculated strategy of only doing interviews with friendly interviewers. I don't think he's been challenged on his thesis in any meaningful fashion yet. And I think that because this debate has become so heated, especially on social media, the gold guys, the Bitcoin guys, I think that the investors out there would benefit greatly from this debate. There's a lot to be learned. I think it would be very informative for everybody. And just to be clear, I am not a Bitcoin hater. I just think that his thesis on gold and Bitcoin needs to be explored. And I think I would love to have the opportunity to explore some of the statements that he's making when he does these interviews.
Well, to be fair, Frank, there's a lot of people out there who may not have a very good understanding on gold, who may have said potentially inaccurate things factually, or maybe their outlook doesn't make sense. So why Michael Saylor in particular? He's one of many.
He is one of many, but I think he is, and I'm just guessing, and I've listened to other Bitcoin promoters, people that love to get out there and talk about Bitcoin. There's a few of them out there, 4 or 5 that I followed. I think out of all of them, Michael has had the most traction. I think that he is really influencing the investment community, and he is getting traction. He's a very smart guy. He's doing a great job of selling the story, his thesis, by painting an Italian sunset, using language which is a mixture of poetry and science that is bordering on the evangelical.
Okay.
And that's great. And he is having, I think, the most impact out of all the folks out there promoting the Bitcoin thesis. So I've listened to his arguments, and I want to discuss a lot of what he's saying. Some make sense. I think Bitcoin does have some similarities to gold, but I think there's some very major differences.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand that you have to understand those differences to know where Bitcoin and or gold fits in any portfolio, because all asset classes serve a different purpose in a portfolio. And I think that if you don't understand that distinction, you're going to make your investment for the wrong reasons.
Okay. Where you and I spoke offline about making the about a hashtag on Twitter, Saylor versus Giustra. We're going to try to make that trend. So that's the hashtag, guys. Use that. It's a great hashtag you came up with. I have to take partial credit for that.
Thank you. No, but I think that's I'm trying to. I can see that he does not want to have this conversation.
Yeah, that was my next question. Has he responded at all? I mean, you've been trying this for weeks.
From what I understand, because I don't have direct contact to him, but from what I understand, he was presented with the case. He asked all about me and asked for a bunch of material on who I am and what I've done and what I've spoken about in the past and what I've written about in the past. And then the minute he got that, he went completely silent. And you know what? My issue is I don't want to do this debate is getting very heated, and there's a lot of passion on both sides of the argument that's getting kind of crazy out there. And I don't want to have the type of conversation where we're lobbing rhetorical hand grenades at each other. I want to have a conversation about the facts. Just the facts. No Italian sunset. Just let's discuss your thesis and let me just ask you a few questions about it.
Well, Michael's got a big following on social media and in the investment community. Aren't you afraid, or I don't know if afraid is a backward, but aren't you concerned about backlash from the Bitcoin community? Is that something that you've thought about?
Oh, it's already started on social media. You should follow my Twitter account.
I do follow your Twitter.
And some of it's hilarious. I mean, and I think there's one central theme that seems to be coming from the Bitcoin fans out there that are obviously Michael Saylor followers, is that there's no need to have this debate. Just go out there, buy Bitcoin, and get over it. Number one, just buy it and get over it. You've lost the argument already. Or let it just settle where it settles. Let people do what they want, and Bitcoin goes up and gold goes down. They'll be proven right down the road.
Right.
Which is fine, and I can understand that. Yeah, that's one approach. But I think there's been so many things said about gold by Michael Saylor mostly and others that I think it needs some clarification. I think investors will really appreciate to get this clarification.
Sure. All right. We're not going to reveal too much of your strategy and what you want to talk about. We'll save that for the actual debate sometime down the line. But I do want to bring up these tweets that Saylor has made, and I'd like you to address them. So first of all, this one: shareholder value creation comes from holding an appreciating asset, BTC, over a long period of time. It is logical for every firm, both public and private, in the Bitcoin industry to do the same thing Tesla is doing. So he's, as you're aware, Tesla has bought $1.5 billion of Bitcoin rather. And the argument here is that if every company, the S&P 500, does the same thing, well, Bitcoin's market cap is going to increase exponentially. And that's what he's advocating for. Take a look at this tweet here. You've actually retweeted this and you've commented on this. Following the light of the sun, we left the old world. What is the old world? Is he referring to gold?
Yes, which he calls the analog world. Yeah, that's what he's referring to.
All right. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well,
is gold the analog world?
He's using some very flowery language out there. It sounds great. I mean, but I don't know what it means. And until I get to ask him a lot of the questions I'd love to ask him, to me, it doesn't mean anything. I could make very similar statements about gold or other things. That doesn't mean anything. Give me the facts, just the facts. That's all I care about. Well, then I can make up my own mind. By the way, he may convince me. I have my views. I think Bitcoin is going a lot higher. For reasons that have nothing to do with what he's stating Bitcoin is. Okay, there's where we differ.
Well, if Michael is watching this interview right now, which I hope he does, if it gets circulated around on social media enough, I hope this lands in his lap somehow. If he is watching, what would you say to him right now?
I would say, listen, you seem to have tremendous conviction. If your conviction is very strong, so why are you afraid of debating me if you have such strong conviction? I'm not going to bite. I would just ask you to step out of your echo chamber for just a moment and get some fresh air, and just have a conversation with someone who's actually going to challenge you on some of your points.
Okay, I'm just going to do some role playing here. So you and I have spoken about this offline, so I'm going to bring it up. Suppose I'm Michael Saylor. I would say, well, why should I debate you? Who is Frank Giustra? I'm sorry, I've never met you before. Who are you again?
Well, he is an expert in Bitcoin, and I respect that. I'm an expert in gold. I've been writing about gold and speaking in public forums about gold for over 20 years now. I do know something about the subject. I'm one of a handful of people that does. And I think that I'm the appropriate person he should have this conversation with, because he's been saying a lot of things that I need to clarify.
Well, what do you think is the ideal outcome of this debate? For not just yourself, but also investors who watch the show?
Well, I think if it happens, and I'm hoping it happens, although I'm getting becoming less and less optimistic. I think he's just going to avoid me. But if it does happen, I think investors can then go, okay, I'm going to buy Bitcoin for these reasons.
Yeah.
And I will buy gold for these other reasons. And they're two very different things. And so I think that's really all I want to get out there, so that people can go, okay, Bitcoin is probably a great bet. I'm going to make some money out of Bitcoin. But, gold has a role in my portfolio that I don't think Bitcoin really can ever challenge.
Well, that's an excellent point, Frank, because some people are saying, well, what's the point of having a debate? Let's just hold both, right? Jim Cramer, for example, what would you say to Jim Cramer? Because he's a longtime advocate of gold. He still is, but for the longest time, he's advocated to hold 10% of your portfolio in gold. Now he's saying 5% gold, 5% Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I mean, would you agree with him?
Well, I have no, I can't get into Jim Cramer's mind.
Sure.
I can only guess that Jim Cramer is suffering from FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
No, it's true. It's really hard to watch something go straight up and not feel that pull and be lured into it. I'm having the same problem with Bitcoin. I'm watching it going up, and I'm just holding on to my discipline to understand it better before I jump in. But boy, I have FOMO too. I'd love to get on, on some action that, on an asset class that is going through the roof. So Jim Cramer, I'm sure, is doing that. And, I'm sure he has other reasons for it. But I think the other institutional, you brought up a good point, because, Saylor and others have talked about, the number of institutional players coming into the game that are, the really important hedge fund managers, Paul Tudor Jones, Druckenmiller, Gunlatch, and then Musk, on behalf of Tesla. But I think the investors should understand, why are these institutions, these hedge funds, doing it? They have, Michael is promoting the idea of buying Bitcoin and holding it forever, passing it down through generations, to never ever sell it, because it's going to $100,000, $500,000, $1 million per Bitcoin. I've heard all three numbers from him.
Yeah.
And that's fine for Michael, but Paul Tudor Jones is one of the greatest traders on Wall Street. I suspect that his time frame, his time horizon, might be different than what Michael is suggesting it should be. And someone like Paul Tudor Jones will never tell you that he's about to sell his Bitcoin. You'll hear about it. You ask him a year or 2 years from now, what happened to your Bitcoin? You go, oh yeah, well, we made a great profit. And that's so. I think that, again, and I don't want to give away too much, because I want to have this debate with Michael. He is saying a lot of things that I would, challenge or question or dig deeper in.
Yeah, I do have one more question on this, and then I'll let you go, because again, don't go into too much if you don't want to. But how would you be prepared to address this point? Saylor has repeatedly said on various media that Bitcoin is superior to gold, and one thing he has brought up, which is correct, is that gold's price has lagged behind Bitcoin this year. Objectively, that's just what it is. But he said that that's because gold is inferior to Bitcoin, and so all the gold investors are moving into Bitcoin. Would you be prepared to address that? You don't have to give your answer now, but would you have a response to that?
Yeah, my response is that let's address the gold price performance this year. I think it has a lot more to do with the steepening of the yield curve than it has to do with Bitcoin. Right. But having said that, I do believe that Bitcoin has eaten a bit into that marginal buyer of what would have been a marginal buyer of gold or Bitcoin is going into Bitcoin. The speculators that are looking for gold features are going into, a lot of them are going into Bitcoin. This is absolutely true. And it is having obviously had a very positive effect on Bitcoin, and it is having somewhat of a negative effect on gold. But I don't think any of the major gold investors around the world are making that switch yet.